Hey everybody, this is Lauren Stein over here at Activate. I am the manager of implementation, and today we're going to go over question and answers. We're going to start off with questions that were sent in prior to today, and then once we are done with those questions, we are going to go into the questions sent in live during the webinar. So if you have any questions, go ahead and you can start typing them into the question box, and we will get to those, like I said, once we're done with the beginning portion of this for the ones that were sent in prior. All right, so to get started, we had a few questions come in about the lists maintained in QuickBooks versus which ones are maintained in Activate. And since we had so many customers asking about it, new and old, I figured we'd go ahead and just do a brief overview of what those are and where they're maintained. So we're going to start out with the list maintained fully in QuickBooks, and the first one being chart of accounts, including the closing date for your books. Now let's go ahead and take a look at QuickBooks to see where that information is stored. So if we go into QuickBooks, let's go ahead and start off in where the closing date is set. So we have to be in single user mode. Go to Edit, Preferences, Accounting, and Company Preferences. And then you can set the date and password here at the bottom, the Set Date Password. You can have a closing date as well as the password to open those books or modify things that are in those prior periods. Before you set the closing date, I would make sure to run a sync with Activate, and if there are any errors, get those errors resolved before you close the books. Once you have a clean sync, you can go ahead in QuickBooks, set the closing date, and then run a sync so Activate knows that closing date is set. And then also that will give you the opportunity to see if there were any transactions posted in between the last time you synced and setting the closing date, in case those affect those prior periods. Now the chart of accounts is in the list, and this is where Activate gets the list of GL accounts that you can assign to product classes or also to your warehouses. The one other list that's maintained solely in QuickBooks is payment methods. Payment methods are going to be things like check, cash, credit card. Even if you want to go as specific as MasterCard, Visa, the type of credit card it is, or ACH or EFT or anything like that, that's where the payment method is done, and that's in QuickBooks. So again, that'll be a list, customer and vendor profile list, and payment methods. And so you would set this up, and then in Activate you can actually specify whether or not those payment methods are credit cards or not. So if it's specified as being a credit card, then it's going to require a number if you use that payment method. Another list is the sales rep list, which is separate from the employee, vendor, and other names list. You can create the sales rep and assign it to an employee, vendor, or other name, or you can also create it as such whenever you create the sales rep if it's something that's not already in there. Simply setting up a new employee or vendor doesn't add them to the sales rep list. So again, let's go back into QuickBooks, and it's still in the list menu, customer and vendor profile list, and then sales rep. And so here you would just go new, you would add a sales rep name, initials, and then if that sales rep isn't in the list, you just put in sales rep. You can do quick add and add it as a vendor, employee, or an other name right here. And then after you create that new sales rep, you run a sync, and that will be created and Activate for you to use on customers and sales orders. All right, and if you charge sales tax, the tax items, groups, and codes are set up in QuickBooks as well. Those groups are synchronized to Activate as tax categories, which the system admin can mark shipping as being tax exempt. When that option is checked, any item listed on a taxable sales order with the item type of shipping, which we'll get into that a little bit later on, will be exempt from sales tax. And just a quick look at where that's done in QuickBooks, that's going to be, you can either do it in your preferences under sales tax. Once sales tax is turned on, you can add a sales tax item. You would add an item for each specific percentage, and then a group would be the total percentage that you charge to your customers. And you'll see these also in the item list You can see these here. It shows the percents as well as the totals. All right. And then the terms code list is also maintained in QuickBooks. This would be things like 210 net 30 days, net 60 days, etc. This tells Activate in QuickBooks what the due date should be based on the invoice dates you're creating. Now this is for both sales and purchase invoices. And again, list, customer and vendor profile list, terms list. And when you hit new, you can give the terms a name, you can set the number of days, the discount percent, if there's a discount percent, and then also if they get a discount, if it's paid within a number of days. Or if it's date driven, you can specify that information there as well. The last list maintained solely in QuickBooks is the vendor list. As of now in Activate, we don't have a vendor maintenance utility like we do for customers. Therefore, the vendor name, address, phone number, contact information, etc. are all set up in QuickBooks and synchronized to Activate. Once this list is available via the sync, users with the proper permissions can create POs for these vendors or add these vendors to the items you purchase from, as well as the specific vendor price if that is something that you have a knowledge of when you're creating that record. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but to create a new vendor, you go to the Vendor Center, click New Vendor, enter in all the details, their default terms, address, main contact information, and that information will sync over to Activate for you to use on the product records. So A121 on the vendors, you have this list of vendors that you've purchased this product from, as well as the specific vendor product IDs, prices, last PO price. You can specify a vendor as being preferred, and this is the vendor that it'll default to for special order, dropship POs, as well as using the reorder wizard with business alerts. And just a quick reminder that customers do sync both ways between Activate and QuickBooks, but as always, we recommend creating the customer records in Activate since there are more available fields. Activate has branch, which is related to the accounts receivable account, and then also you can assign, different ship to locations as well as specific customer contacts. All that's going to be maintained in Activate. The product list is also maintained solely in Activate. During the synchronization process, the product classes are actually created as non-inventoried items in QuickBooks, and these are used for the details on sales invoices. So on the sales invoice in QuickBooks, you'll see the item ID on an invoice in QuickBooks created by Activate as the product class ID from Activate, and the item description in QuickBooks will appear as the Activate ID dash the Activate description. So if we take a look at invoices created from Activate in QuickBooks, you'll see the item code as DEP, and then this is actually customer deposit, which is also something we're going to get into a little bit later on in this webinar. So this is the product class ID from Configuration Manager. So you see deposit, customer deposits. And then this is the item ID and description from Activate. It might be better to look at an invoice for actual. So we see here the supplies item code is the product class ID, and then B10 and the description from Activate are here as the description. All right, and then we had a couple of questions come through from our customers specifically related to sales orders and sales order management. One of the questions that came through was about unscheduling sales orders. So in version 10.2, for those of you that have updated, we actually do have 10.2 SP1 available on the help site now in the downloads page. Order Manager gives the user the ability to unschedule sales orders. So doing this sets the order status to booked, so the item availability is no longer affected by the order being scheduled. As with QuickBooks, this does not change the order type back to quote. It only removes the items from the current availability calculation because those orders are no longer scheduled. having the booked status does not affect your item availability. So this also gives you the ability to move availability to orders you're trying to get out the door at maybe a higher priority, and it also removes the items from reorder reports as well as the reorder wizard if those orders that you unscheduled affected those reports, since the items are no longer included in the calculations. So let's take a look at this feature in Activate. It is the order manager. So let's take a look at some of these and unschedule some of these orders so you can see that the changes that happen on screen. So let's look at scheduled orders. And we'll say we don't want these that are partially scheduled to affect availability, and one of these ready to pick, we want to unschedule that because somebody did that by accident. So we do action, unschedule. 4 orders were unscheduled. They're now removed from the scheduled button on Order Manager, and you can see them on the booked button. Now they do stay checked, and we do that because you may want to continue to process these orders, but you can clear all selections if you need to. If you're on another button with other orders checked that are, let's say the ones we didn't clear, those selections are unbooked, and you perform actions on the active button, it's only going to perform those actions on the active button. It's not going to perform actions on any other button other than one you have active. And then now let's go to back ordered, and let's check all of them and go ahead and schedule these because we want to schedule these since they've been partially invoiced before we schedule the ones that are new orders. Okay, and then now we have quite a few more scheduled orders ready to go. I don't have a default reschedule workflow status selected, so they stayed as partially invoiced, which you can change that in Configuration Manager if you want to. And again, just to recap, that sets their status as booked so they no longer affect the availability, which gave us the ability to allocate those items to other orders. All right, we've got a few other customers who would like to print invoices for all, well, at the same time as they print shipping documents or customer pickups. This can also be done utilizing Sales Order Manager. You can select the orders pertaining to this scenario, print or email the necessary shipping documents, and then run prepare invoices for those same orders. So let's go back to Activate, and we'll start off by looking at the orders with ready to pick as their workflow status. Right now we've only got 2. And let's actually go back here and select the partially invoiced workflow statuses. I'm going to go ahead and select all and then uncheck the ones that aren't partially invoiced. And we're going to change the workflow status to ready to pick. So now we've got quite a few orders in ready to pick. And so what you would do is you would either check all, or let's say we only want to check the ones that are fully scheduled because we like to ship orders complete. So we'll uncheck the triangles or the ones with the yellow. Triangles are for the people that are colorblind, so they can still differentiate between fully scheduled, partially scheduled, or completely back ordered. All right, and the ones, once we're ready, we go to Action, Print Sales Pick Tickets if you wanted to print pick tickets. So this is going to be the default report, and then you'll see the other reports available to you below that. And then you can also go straight to printing the pack list. So if you wanted to print the pack list for these orders, you go ahead, print 9 shipping documents. Yes, here are all the packing lists. We can go ahead and print those and send those to the customers. And you'll see each one has a separate page. Let's say we printed it and we closed it, and now we're ready to go ahead and do those invoices because we want to send those invoices out as well. So we'll go to Prepare Invoices. You can check this email box if you wanted to send an email PDF copy of the invoice for any order that lists a email address. We're going to uncheck that. Also, if you have credit card service set up in Configuration Manager, you can check this option to process the credit cards for these orders as well. Now I'm not going to add any shipping to these. I'm just going to assume that that's already good to go, and I'm going to prepare invoices, and this will show me if any orders aren't ready to be invoiced. This one has missing assortment selection. We're going to go ahead and ignore that. And let's say we've got 8 invoices prepared. So now we've got the packing list printed for these orders, and we've got 8 of the 9 orders invoiced. They're completed, so they're not going to show up in any of these other buttons. All right, and then you go to Sales, Print Invoices, Print Unprinted Invoices, and you can preview or not preview those if you want to. Hit OK, and this will be all the invoices that haven't been printed prior to using that option. And you can print these invoices, and then you're done. You can hit Finished, send them off to your warehouse employees or the trucks that are going to be sending this or delivering these orders to your customers, and you can do it all at once. Now, if that process doesn't work for you and you want to print the invoice before you print any other documents, the only way to do that, if you are still going to want to print the pick tickets or pack lists, is to set up an order report that looks like your invoice report to print from the print orders window or option. So it would be print sales orders, and you'd have an alternate format that said like order invoice or print invoice or something like that, depending on your needs. Now, this doesn't actually mean that it's been invoiced. It just gives you the ability to print a form that looks like an invoice so your customer can go ahead and pay you if they haven't already. Another question we get asked a lot about is customer deposits or multiple customer payments. So you have 2 options here. One would be to create the customer payments in QuickBooks to be applied to the invoices after synchronization. Or the second option would be to use a customer deposit product. We actually have the customer deposit steps outlined on our help site. So you create a deposit other current liability account, add that to a product class, and then you create a customer deposit product where you assign that customer deposit product class to. So that way you would invoice this customer deposit as you are creating and applying these customer deposits and or other payments, like multiple payments. So if we go to inventory, just show you here real quick, product class, deposit, you can see that I have this customer deposits GL account. Now that is set up as an other current liability, and it will be reconciled once you go through the full process. So the full process is to add this customer deposit to a sales order. So we're going to open order A1491T. We're going to have it be scheduled. And what you would do is you would add this deposit product. What you'll do is you'll create an invoice for the one customer deposit, and we'll just say it was cash. It's $530.43, so that's 50% down. Invoice. And then you go back to the sales order, you schedule it, and then add that deposit line back. And it was $530.43. And so that way when you create the invoice for the remaining products, it subtracts that $530.43. You'll create the invoice, and then once that invoice is created and synchronized over to QuickBooks, that amount will be reconciled out of the customer deposits account. And you'll have the invoice that's paid for the original customer deposit, as well as the second invoice with the remaining payment, if you had any, applied to it as well. And then so you can do this as many times as you need. If you're doing multiple customer payments, that would give you the ability to select a different payment method each time. And we have customers that do both ways. We have customers that do the customer deposit on the sales orders and invoice them as needed and activate. And then we also have customers that apply these payments in QuickBooks and then wait for those invoices to be synchronized to apply them to the invoices in QuickBooks. Either way is up to you, but there is a way to do it in Activate. All right, and then customer discounts are handled a few different ways. There is a default discount percent in Activate assigned to the customer record. On the Prices tab, we have this default discount percent. Now this would add a discount percent to the whole order. So that's going to put it, we'll open a different one. That's going to put it down here at the bottom. We'll schedule this one. And you'll see that we have the discount. You can do a whole order discount of 10%. Or if you want to do an amount like $10, you would just delete that percent and it'll be $10 instead of 10%. And it'll default to a percent if you have percent marked in Configuration Manager. It'll default to amount if you have amount set up in Configuration Manager. Now, if you use this default or this discount percent on the whole order, that is going to be sent to QuickBooks using the discount product, which is assigned in Configuration Manager. It'll be as a line item on the invoice in QuickBooks. And then the other options would be to add it manually to the sales order like I did here, rather than letting it default from the customer record. Or in this percent column, you can add percentages to each line. Now that's just going to discount the lines. It's not going to use the discount account. So if you wanted to track it as on the discount product itself, you would have to add it to the bottom for it to be tracked that way. Because Activate is just going to send the total price to QuickBooks on the invoice during sync. All right, and then we had a few questions come in for purchasing. Vendor discounts also have a couple of options. The first option is to include the Other Amounts tab on the Purchase Invoice window. You can either enter the amount as a negative and choose a GL account to apply it to, or if you have the landed cost module, you can utilize that to allocate this discount over the items received on the PO. So if we go to an issued purchase order, you can see here that everything's been received. And then when you're ready, you click Invoice. And let's say your invoice includes this discount. So you go to the Other Amounts tab and you add a description. And let's say it's $20. And if you're not using landed costs, you would select the expense account using this browse. If you are using landed costs, then you would check this landed cost button, and this would save the purchase invoice, open landed costs, and pull in all the related receipts for this purchase order for you to allocate this negative $20 to. Because if you're doing the discount and you're allocating it across your products, you're going to want your product unit cost to reflect that, obviously. So that's why you would use landed cost. All right. And another option would be to change or to manually calculate that discount into each line. So you would say that, you know, it was $20 and I wanted to maybe take $5 off of each line. You could just override the amount approved to be minus $5 for each one until your total adds up to the total cost for your purchase invoice that you have in your hand. Another option would be to add a discount product to the purchase order before you invoice it. And then when you click Invoice, manually approve that line and create your purchase invoice. Again, that is not going to allocate any change in the unit cost. It's just going to be expensed. But if you were to decide to allocate it manually, let's say if you don't have landed cost, and you add that information to the amount approved, once you save and create this invoice, it's actually going to update the receipts to match the price on the PO invoice. So that's kind of a way around using landed cost if you didn't want to do that. Because the purchase invoice price will override the receipt unit cost to match, because creating the purchase invoice in Activate reconciles accrued purchase receipts or whatever account you use as your purchases account on the warehouse. Okay, we also had a question coming in on how to receive multiple purchase orders in bulk. So that gets into session versus transaction for your inventory transactions, for lack of a better word. So you would start on the inventory receipt window, select a PO number, and add a new transaction for each new PO you're receiving against. And then once you're finished, when you post that session, it will actually post each transaction into inventory. giving you the ability to receive multiple POs at one time. All right, so if we go to, you can start from a purchase order and click receive, or you can go to inventory receipts. I already have one session created, so you can see we've got purchase order 1193, warehouse D, and this is the product that is related to that purchase order. Then we also have transaction 2 for purchase order 1199, and that one has a different product and also is for a different warehouse. So let's say before we post this, we want to add one more PO, add transaction, look up a purchase order number. We're going to go with purchase order 1200. That's got quite a few products on it, and that one is also for warehouse D. You can go through and say, okay, we didn't receive 25, we only received 20. You can do that for any line. If maybe you didn't receive this product, you just highlight the row and hit the delete key on your keyboard to delete it. And then you'll save, and you see all 3 of these transactions with the related vendor and purchase order number. And then the session number and the session date will be used across all of these. So once we post, if the user has access to inventory reports, they'll be able to see the transaction report, and you'll see transaction 1, warehouse D, PO 1193. Here are the products related, transaction 2, and transaction 3, as well as transaction totals and session totals. And now you have all 3 of these POs have been received, so you can go ahead and, if you've received those purchase invoices, you can go ahead and create those. All right, and a few questions also came in about our landed cost module and how it affects other transactions. The main questions related to posting landed costs for receipts already sold to customers. So when you post a landed cost session, any transaction, whether it's an assembly, sale, transfer, etc., any inventory transaction, after the original receipt, which is being used, will be updated to reflect this new unit cost. So this means posting a landed cost session related to receipts in January will update any related customer invoices or transfers or assemblies with the proper unit cost or cost of goods sold amount based on this new transaction that you posted. The only thing that would block this update would be closing your books and attempting to post a landed cost session in a prior period. So we recommend waiting until all transactions related to the period have been posted before closing your books. This may mean being a month or 2 in arrears when it comes to closing prior periods. So let's say if you normally get your landed cost bills at the end of every month because you're having the same carrier ship this stuff to you and you're responsible for the shipping costs to get it to your warehouse, you should probably wait to close your prior months until those freight bills have been received and entered as landed cost, because those are going to affect those prior receipts if you're a month behind in entering in these landed cost bills. So just keep that in mind when you're posting landed cost. Also related to landed cost, we were asked what happens to the bill created by these sessions when you void the inventory session. Activate will remove the landed cost journal from QuickBooks, but it won't void the bill related to the session if you created a bill using landed cost. This means somebody with QuickBooks access will need to void, that doesn't mean delete, it's actually void the vendor bill related to the voided landed cost session in QuickBooks. So the user voiding such a session is also warned at the time you void. So let's take a look at voiding transactions. That's in the inventory menu, void inventory session. This is available in version 10.2. We will look up a landed cost session. Now, landed cost session 60 did create a vendor bill, so I just wanted you to see what happens whenever you void this session. So we're saying, okay, we want to void it. We're good to go. We'll hit void. This warning pops up. Are you sure you want to void landed cost inventory session 60? Any related vendor bills will not be voided, only the inventory session. So hit yes. That's going to void the inventory session in Activate. So when you run a sync, that journal is going to be removed. I'm going to start a sync. And so you'll also need to go into QuickBooks and void that related cost if you're not going to, if that landed cost bill as a whole was created incorrectly. Now, if you're going to be recreating that landed cost session with the same amount, then you just uncheck the create bill box on the landed cost session, which that's this checkbox right here. You would just uncheck that, allocate or load the items depending on what you're loading for, allocate it, and then post. As long as it's the same amount, you wouldn't have to do anything to that vendor bill. Let's say you just applied it to the wrong receipt sessions or something. But if you did need to recreate that vendor bill for landed cost, then you would need to come into the vendor center, and it was American Delivery, this delivery invoice. And instead of clicking delete, because if you delete it in QuickBooks, the sync will recreate it. But if you click this down arrow and click void, this will void the vendor bill in QuickBooks, and then the sync will not try to recreate it. The next time you run a sync. Because we did have a question on, if we delete it, it gets recreated. Well, that's because it needs to be voided, not deleted. All right, product information. So for the product list, we had a few questions come in about these certain fields that are available on each product window. The first one is about the product photos. These are added on the product specs tab. The only caveat to adding these is it needs to come from a shared location on your network. So it would be wise to create a shared folder on the server to save and use for this reason. If you don't use a shared location, a user without access to that specific location, opening the product could potentially remove that photo just because they don't have access and it can't access it. So to add a photo to a product, we would do A121 again. And it's done on the product specs tab. Hit edit, click this little plus sign, and I'm going to go to a shared location. This program data is where the custom reports are saved. And then you just save it, and that picture is available there. And so you can add that to reports if you need to. We do have one report that prints that, I believe, which is the product information report. If you need to add it to other reports, just get with our support team or report writer, and they can help you with that. You can also import this information into Activate if you need to. Just make sure to put the full file path in the import for the photo field. We were also asked about item type, and product class. Item type tells Activate how to handle the item in transactions. If it's inventoried, Activate will use the inventory GL accounts assigned to each warehouse for the posted transactions. It will require you to receive and or post inventory transactions to ensure the quantity on hand is always up to date. Non-inventoried items are expensed when utilized on the PO or sales order windows using the related cost of goods sold account typically linked to product class. Other charge, shipping, and labor are also available item types. Other charges would be like the customer deposit we talked about previously, or maybe another type of fee you charge to your customers. Shipping tells Activate to either not charge sales tax if the item is available for a whole order discount, or it also gives you the ability to select a default shipping item to use when adding shipping on the invoice order window. Labor is typically used for items directly related to labor expenses or manufacturing items. You can set a standard cost per warehouse in order to roll up the cost of labor onto a finished good. The same goes for any non-inventoried other charge and shipping items. They all have the ability to assign cost per warehouse using standard cost to charge to a specific account. That account is called the cost offset account, and it is set on the non-inventory tab of your warehouse. The different categories are product type, product class, and sales category. Product type and class are available on the lookup windows as filters and are required fields. Normally, product class is related to income and cost of goods sold accounts, and it gives you the ability to break out your chart of accounts based on certain product groupings. Sales category is a third option which isn't available in the product lookup window, nor is it required, but there are 2 sales reports grouped on this category. But the remaining standard Activate reports are grouped by product class, customer, vendor, or warehouse. And those fields on the product window are these main fields here. We have item type, and then also if you have the purchasing wizard module, you'll also see dropship only and special order only. You have product type and product class and sales category. Now again, the majority of our standard Activate reports are grouped on product class, but we do have 2 that are grouped on sales category. And the product lookup window, you see product type and product class is available filters over here on the right hand side. Okay, so for the reports, we also had a couple of questions coming in about the report catalog, specifically about things like the option to not override report definitions. This should be used when you've moved, modified the selection prompts, or copied reports to another location when working with a standard or a custom report. This option tells Activate to not override any changes made to the report itself. So that means the report definition, the actual selection prompts, where it's located in the catalog, etc., even down to the report type. If the update includes a new report file for something like the receipt register, checking this box will mean that any changes you've made to the receipt register, like selection prompts or where it's printed, number of copies, location of the report, etc., won't be affected, but that standard report file itself will be updated during the update. Now again, that's not going to update the selection prompts or anything like that. That's the whole purpose of that option. So we have some customers that in their report catalog, they like to move things around, add new folders, or even add to the selection prompts. Like this inventory receipts, you can add PO number as a selection prompt. And then on the Properties tab, if you check this Do Not Overwrite Changes to the Definition during Activate Update and you've added that PO number to the selection prompt, it won't change the selection prompts during the update, even if the report itself changes. Because when you go to version 10.2, some of these reports have been updated to reflect the posted timestamp if it's been a posted session. So it'll update the report, but it won't update the selection prompts, or let's say if you print numerous copies or if you've moved it to a different folder location in the catalog. I would recommend doing that for custom reports as well, just as a safeguard. The update shouldn't be overriding custom report definitions or reports, but we always still recommend checking that for any report that's been modified in any way. And then we also had some questions specific to what type of reports they should use in certain scenarios. So if you're looking for a report that's a products purchased by a customer, you can use the product by customer detail or summary reports. These reports have the option of filtering by date, customer, or product ID. So if we go back to Activate and go to reports, it's in the customer reports, customer sales reports, product by customer detail. You can select this and you can filter based on, let's say last year. You can do a range. If you do a range or a specific date, value 1 and value 2 will appear accordingly. And then you can also filter on a range of customers or a specific customer. So let's say we just want to see products purchased by ABC last year. And this will pull in that detailed report on which invoice, which order, the quantity, amount, cost, margin, profit percent, and the specific sales rep related to each one. And at the end of the report, you'll see totals for each column. And for a report on what a salesperson sold for a period of time, you can use any of the salesperson sales reports in the order processing section of the reports menu. All of these can be filtered on invoice date and salesperson, as well as other filters depending on the type of report. So if we go back to the reports menu, go to order processing, salesperson sales reports, these are the standard reports we have. So let's say we want to do a commission report to figure out what commissions we should pay to our salespeople. This is just going to give you the information that you need to figure out how much to pay. It's not going to calculate the percentages for you. It's just going to give you the totals. So let's say invoices last quarter, because that was the end of last year, and we only want to see it for Judy Jones. So this is at the end, it'll give you the total amount, cost amount, margin, and profit percent for Judy Jones for last quarter for all the invoices that have been created for her sales. Now, this is going to be all invoices. Commission on paid invoices only going to show you invoices that have been paid in full. So if you only could do commission based on invoices paid in full, that's the one you would use. We also had some questions about product demand. We have quite a few reports that you can use for this. There's a monthly demand summary in the inventory report section. It's inventory management analysis. We have this monthly demand. There's also a comparative sales by product class in the product sales report section of the order processing reports. And then we also have the comparative sales by product class by customer in the customer sales report section of the customer reports. And this will give you some of the information you need for those demand, what customers are buying what, when, and what products. All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions that we have coming in. All right, the first question is, can you create expiration dates on pricing, and will this notify you when pricing has expired? Prices can be assigned expiration and beginning dates, but you will not receive a notification when they expire. However, Activate will not use these pricing rules that are expired unless you select to do so. So in Activate, I believe product A121 has some special prices. Let's say R is only for January. Okay, and then if we add this to a sales order, you select the price code. This customer doesn't have a price that's related to a default or price code listed on that product, so it defaults to list. When you look up the price codes, you're only going to see the active prices, but we have a checkbox here at the bottom to include expired and future prices. So if you wanted to, you could add that expired or future price, or you could completely hide it, either way. If you want to be notified when these prices are expired, you can create notes, either as just general reminders to specific users to update prices or on the customer window itself. And all of these windows have notes, so I'll just show you how to do that here. You could say follow up by, I'm going to give it to myself, and I want to follow up at the end of February because I know that they have prices that are expiring then, and say, you know, follow up on prices. And right here it's assigned to the order, but you can move it to a business activity if you have it, customer accounts, customer credit, location, invoice, order, PO, product, or track and trace. And then when you have that, you'll see the follow up by, the date, and then when they've completed it, they would just open it and complete it. And you'll see completed here. Will we be able to modify a serial number? You can modify serial numbers after they've been posted. Let's say if you added an incorrect digit or something on a serial number, you can go to the serial number tab, hit edit, and say, well, this should have had a leading 0, so you should add that leading 0. And then you can see here that that changes the serial number. When it comes to adjusting or modifying the value, you'd have to actually post transactions to do that. And depending on your cost method, if you have actual cost, you'll be able to select the specific serial number or lot number. If you have average cost, you will not be able to select the specific serial number or lot number because the cost isn't linked to the specific identifier. There's one about basically sending emails from Activate. So we have a couple of options on sending emails from Activate, and that's set up in Configuration Manager. So we have the company information where you can select to send it through Microsoft Mail, which is going to use your Outlook connection, or SMTP, which is going to log directly into your email service to send those emails. A lot of times we recommend using SMTP because it's a direct link to your email server. But if you want to see the emails in your sent folder, you'll need to use Mappy. And you may see some prompts whenever you try to send emails through Activate when you're using Mappy to allow access. That is a default program setting in Windows, and if that just drives you crazy, then just go ahead and set it up as SMTP to get around that. We use Office 365 here at Activate, and so the SMTP information for Office 365 is smtp.office365.com with the port of 587, and then the specific type of encryption, and then you would check authentication required, enter in the username, which is the email address, and their password as if they're logging into their email online, and then make sure to have the email address that matches up here at top of the user information. And then once that's set up, they should be able to send emails through Activate as long as, the username and password is correct, as well as the server and port number. You can grab that information from the options if you log into your email online. Usually you can go to settings and grab the SMTP login information. So that's the server and port information. Okay, one question is, can I customize the layout sequence of these order manager buttons? Yes, you can customize the order manager buttons. However, the ones that are the default sales order, service order, and workflow status, you can't actually modify those. Those come as a standard to Activate. But if you do configure, you can copy this to create your own version of this, or you can add a new one, and you can, select, let's just go ahead and do copy. And you can move them around or delete them as needed. So you could say, well, I only want to see quotes and open orders. I don't want to see back orders. I don't want to see anybody on credit holds. And then you can move that around. If you grab it over here on the left-hand side, you can move it around to where it shows based on your need. And again, that's just kind of like a drag and drop kind of thing. We do have a couple of questions specific to pricing, and we've actually done an entire webinar on pricing options in Activate, but the basic hierarchy is customers. So that's contract, customer specific prices, or product categories assigned to the customer to get specific discounts for those categories of products. Then it goes to the product specific prices. Then it goes to product price category prices. And if nothing is set up for any of those, if the customer doesn't have a default price code related to product specific or price category prices, then it'll use list. But if you want the specific information on how that works, how you reset prices, all that good stuff, then I would check out the pricing options webinar, because there are just so many different ways to do that. Okay, we got a question on, can you mask labor costs to users? So the way to do that is to block the ability to see costs altogether. There isn't an option to do it based on item type. It's going to be either view cost yes or no. So that's done in configuration management for user information. And we set view cost to no. And then also in Service Pack 1, if they have the option to view cost no, but they still need to post inventory transactions, but you also want to block inventory reports because that shows cost, then you can set inventory reports to no, and then when they post like an inventory receipt, if they're doing that, the report actually won't print after you post that receipt anymore. So we've added a little bit of functionality for those people that don't need to see cost. Okay, here's a good question. If you're running Activate on a hosted server and using published apps to access it, can I still use email function in Activate? Generally, when you have a hosted environment, a lot of people elect to not have Microsoft Office on that hosted environment, which means they don't have access to Outlook. So that is when you would want to use SMTP. Large majority of our hosted companies do use SMTP for email because that email uses the email server instead of using Outlook to send the emails. So if you are hosted, I would do the SMTP setup. And regardless if you're using MAPI or SMTP, any email you send out of Activate will show on the screen you sent it from. So if you send an email to your customer from the customer window, that email will appear on the email tab. If you send a sales order to a customer, on that sales order window, you'll see that email linked to the sales order. So we could say email order. The to email address will default based on what's listed in the contact information. This order didn't have one. And you can have email templates as well. So you send it, and then you'll see the preview. You'll see the email on the left-hand side as well as the preview, and then you'll see at the bottom that it has an attachment. So we have some questions about activity review. Actually, not here. Clicked activity. The review, I believe, is what they're asking about. You can set this to be 1 minute, 5 minutes, or 15 minutes. We've got a question about every 30 seconds. We don't actually recommend using something that would be that short, because if you're a customer that uses a whole bunch of business activities and you have it set to 30 seconds, then you could run into issues to where you've got this never-ending query that never completes. So we would definitely recommend doing maybe 1 minute. I would even go as far as 5 minutes or 15 minutes, because you can always click refresh whenever you need to, whenever you feel that's necessary. But for instance, if you had this assigned to anybody and it was anything that was open, but you had it set to 1 minute and you had like 2,000 business activities or something, with other users doing prepare invoices or printing a whole bunch of forms from Order Manager or something else at the same time, that could cause a slowdown in Activate, because SQL's trying to run all these queries, and if you have it set to 30 seconds or a minute and you have a ton of them, then you're probably going to run into some slowdown issues. So I would recommend setting that to 1 minute. Honestly, I would set it to 5 or 15. That's what we do it internally here. Can you rename a custom tab if you created custom fields on a customer record? You can rename the custom field itself, but you can't rename the tab that says custom on the customer window, if that makes sense. I don't think I have any custom fields on the customer. I believe I do on the product though. Oh, maybe not. So you'll see a custom tab here next to activities if you have business activities. You can't rename the tab itself, but you can rename the fields that are shown on there. Let me see if I have any. So you're not going to be able to rename this custom, but you'll be able to rename the labels. All right, and then the last question we're going to cover is, do you have beginner webinars for Activate? Let's say you're new to Activate and I went a little too fast. Obviously, we assume that users that are on these webinars have some form of familiarity with the screens in Activate. So we do have a complete training guide on our help site. So if you go to help.activate.com, hover over Getting Started, training will drop down. And then in this training, it goes over, this is the order in which, if you're starting with Activate, we recommend doing. Here's your default logins if you're like just in the model company. And then we have each section. So if you click on product information, there's a little explanation on how products, what you do with products in Activate, as well as a checklist on what to do. And in these checklists, it includes things like videos on the specific product information or links to specific features. So if we go to like purchasing process and purchasing process video, this is the whole purchasing process in Activate, with an outline as well as linked articles on when we go over what section and exactly what we're doing on screen. If you're past that point in training and you want to go straight to the webinars, you hover over Learn Activate and go to Webinars. And we record all of our webinars, including this one, and we post them on our help site here. The last webinar will be this picture, which you can click to go to that page. And then we have a full list of archives below it, and they'll be on specific subjects. Now, a lot of our Q&A webinars will have an outline below it that goes over what we covered during the webinar, as well as links that goes do step-by-step instructions on each thing that we did, because obviously we have a limited time on webinars. So we kind of fly through each subject, and that'll give you the opportunity to go through and look at webinars that have step-by-step information on there to get more familiar with those processes. And like I said earlier, we have this pricing options webinar. This goes over all the pricing options in Activate except for customer specific price category, because we did this webinar before that was an option, but we link to the article that explains how to do that if it's something that's been updated and it's not included in that webinar. And obviously, if you see a help or if you go on our help site and you can't find an article on the specific subject that you want, submit a support request and let us know that you don't see that, because we are continually adding content to our help site and we want to make sure that all bases are covered and that any question that you have, let's say if you have it after hours or on the weekend, that you'll be able to find a solution for that online without having to wait for us or call into our support team or wait for us to get back to the office. Thank you for your time. I hope you got some good information here from us today. As always, we hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you the next time we have a webinar.